Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, Senior Writing Coach with Defend and Publish, and welcome to episode 32, Starting Back to School, You and Your Kids. Just a caution for our listeners, if you do not have children, you may not find the content of this episode totally applicable, but there probably are some tips in there that you can use because it does apply to your own starting back to school process as well, assuming you are going back. Okay, so where the episode's idea came from was some planning that I did this morning, where I just realized from a series of texts from my daughter's elementary school and emails from my daughter's high school about various events and projects and that I should go and look and find out what day my school starts. And I came to the realization that I start a full 3 weeks before either one of my children go back to school. And some years this is the case. Some years we all start the same week. Sometimes, which is always my preference, they go back before I do. But this really does require a lot of planning to think out how this works. And what I thought I'd do in this episode today for parents is just walk through a couple of things I realized when this came upon me. And fortunately, the day that I'm recording this is at the end of July. I still have a couple of weeks to get some of this worked out, but I'm glad I looked, is the moral of this story. And so I just want to start with a couple of points/questions to help us all through going back to school when we go back and we have children that are going back. So here's a couple of things that I started thinking through. The first point, and maybe the first question, is just to find out when you actually go back. It may have changed due to the pandemic. Maybe going back is not the same thing. And certainly at the current moment in the pandemic with the Delta variant, this will add some historical context for the future. Right now, my institution, it is assumed we are going back face-to-face, but as we all know, that can change very rapidly. So going back might not even mean going back face-to-face. But assuming it does, for many of us, that does raise the question then of where our children are, unless they're teenagers or old enough to stay home. And so for those of us that take the summer to work at home, I'm not going to say off, because as academics, we're rarely, if ever, off. For those of us that have been at home as the primary caregiver, we obviously need a place to put our children. And so one of the things that I just did is I pulled up the school calendar and my calendar, and I laid the two, I basically split screen, looked at the two side by side, and all I looked for was the following. Where are there conflicts between those opening 2-3 weeks of school and when my children might be home and in need of some care? I do have a high school student, but my high school student is not always at home to watch her younger sister. So yes, I do have some built-in childcare, but as many parents might suggest, leaving my two alone all together all day long is not a practical solution for me for a lot of reasons. So I do take advantage of that, but I'm not able to use it all the time. And in any event, it's not practical a lot of the time because my high school student has a different schedule than my elementary school student. So here's what I discovered, which also might apply to you. As we start back a new academic year, either as a graduate student, as a faculty member, a new faculty member, maybe you're working at several institutions. In that case, you're going to have to compare a couple of different calendars. But one of the things I try to pay attention to is what is happening the week before the semester starts. So our semester in this year of 2021 starts on August 16th, which is it seems like a week earlier, just the way that the days fell out in August than we did last year. And so when I looked at that, I realized I'm really back at work by August 10th. Because there are a lot of days in there that I have required meetings at. Right now, the way that my institution is doing our faculty orientation or faculty preparation week is a mix of Zoom and face-to-face. So what I did next was look to see what is a physical meeting where I need to drive myself, go to campus, be gone for a set period of time, and then do I have childcare for my younger child? So that was the first thing I looked at. And then the next thing I did was check in with my partner, who is also an academic. That week he's a dean, so that is also a problem week for him, and even more so because he's at required meetings. So I just looked to see if there was any chance we could trade off. There isn't, but I'm glad I looked. And this might be the case for you. And if you're, sharing childcare with friends or with partners or spouses or whoever, it's just a good chance to just check, because sometimes that week before school starts is busier than the actual week. So that was the first thing I did. And then I started a little chain going with other parents I know to see if we could do some swapping just to manage that, just for me that week. And for other friends, some of them are also at institutions. They might start a week or two later so they can handle a couple extra kids at their house, but we work some things out. And then the point is that I made some good notes. I made sure I had that worked out. I have a backup plan in case something falls through. And for me, that just helps a lot in entering into the fall semester with a more realistic, slow way to start, where I'm not worrying about childcare on top of trying to start a semester. And so I'm in that scenario then to close that part as, somebody, I'm going back 3 weeks before my children do. So that means for 3 weeks, they are at home without schooling, and I need to accommodate, whatever childcare I'll need to do to make that happen, including for my older daughter, rides to go to and from places. She's not old enough to drive. So that was the first thing that I looked at. I think the game of who goes back first, you might luck out and they go back before you do. I miss those days when that was the case. But if that's the case for you, just check to see. Other things I paid attention to were important things like back to school night. Our schools here in the area of Ohio I'm in have a back to school night where you go and you bring your school supplies in and set up your desk and your locker. And during the pandemic, they still did that, but it was a very spaced out appointment only kind of thing where I could choose a time. I'm guessing that this time it will be a single night where that's happening. And one of the things I needed to look at was, does that night interfere with the night I teach class? Because I have started my semester. So that's another decision that I had to look at. And I would encourage you to check out with your children if there's any of those nights that might fall in the middle of your semester or in the middle of your startup that just are extra that you need to accommodate. A few other things that I looked at is I do have both of my children are in cheerleading. So I had to look at, when are the games? Because even though they don't start back to school till after Labor Day, some of those games are landing right when I'm starting my semester. I know at least one of them has weekday games, so I need to figure that out. Like there's just a lot of moving parts. And so if you're wondering how long this took me to just look at all this, I devoted the entire morning today from 9 to 1 or 8 to 12, whatever it ended up being, just looking at all these pieces together and taking really good notes about where I needed childcare and how I had rides covered and all that. So that's the first part. Another thing that I looked at was, what are some things that I could do now to sort of calmly start both of our semesters that would get us on the right track? And I know for parents of elementary school kids or school age children, I should just say, certainly we have to buy school supplies, or at least if we're not buying them, dig them out of a supply tub like I keep in my house, where I just pitch in the supplies we didn't use. And so we shop in there first and then go buy other ones. But that does require a little bit of forethought to track down where's the school supply list and when are we going to devote some time to it. And the way that I decided to handle that was to tell work with my children to tell them that we will have special, designated shopping days for if we need to go buy school shoes or, school supplies or whatever. We're not going to leave that up to chance. I'm going to look and see where it would be appropriate and where my energy level is going to be that I could actually devote that time to them. Because even though that week before my semester is crazy at my work, that's a week they're starting to be kind of tired of being at home. I'll be gone all day. They'll probably be, wanting some contact with me. And I thought that would be a nice way to sort of wrap up those longer days at work, have some nice dinner, maybe go out to dinner, and then go out and take care of some of those things. So I'm deliberately thinking about those rather than going in a full-on panic. Obviously, if you're doing online shopping, if that's something you do with your children or without them, just thinking of a time to do it. I know there have been a couple of times where I've been in a mad scramble to order school stuff online for them. And just because I did it so late, since I was starting my own semester, I wasn't really thinking about their school. everything's gone and you don't have the supplies you need. One tip for high school parents, with anybody with a high schooler in math, those very expensive calculators that are like $100, and they sometimes have a plug and have all these functions on them. Those sell out really quickly. I found out the hard way last year because I waited too long. So, it's just stuff like that I just tried to get a grip on what absolutely needs to be, purchased, what has to happen, and what can we wait on that school could start for both of us, and we'll just deal with it after Labor Day. So I kind of worked out that sort of stuff. I also did give my children some things to do to give us a more relaxed start, which might be a helpful tip for you. I had everybody go through their drawers and look, and I just said, we had a rule. I said, anything small goes in the hall, and I made them chant it back to me. So they're cheerleaders, so they could chant it back. But that's what I ended up doing, just to be ready for any, new clothing that might come our way, and just to kind of have a grip on what is in there before we start another year. Because I know in 2 weeks, my head will be in my academic semester. I'm going to be out of, summertime, primary caregiver mode. So one of the things that we also have planned then is a night where we can donate used clothing to the school. So having this clean-out period is a great timing, because we'll donate the clothing to the school and drop off the school supplies at the same time. But these are not things that I normally think about. And this is a conversation I have with a lot of academic parents, that, we're thinking about other projects. We're not always thinking about all these little nitty-gritty details. And especially when we start school all at the same time, or, especially when there's a weird overlap when you go back first, it's even harder to remember. So those were a couple of things that we did. And then I just want to point out one last thing that I've really been conscientiously working on, particularly with, children at home and all that. I know I've done some episodes on pandemic parenting and how to manage homeschooling and getting your own writing done. And that was sort of in the heart of pandemic when those were recorded. But one of the things I'm very conscious of now is that, for my children, they have a whole other month left. They have the entire month of August left. At the time that I'm recording this podcast. So this one will come out around, kind of the first or second week of August. They've still got, at that point, even several weeks left, because they don't go back till September 7th or 8th, sometime around there. And so one of the things that I'm going to work very hard at is looking at open moments I have, even when my semester starts back, to still provide some of those summertime activities, so they're just not sitting around the house for 3 weeks waiting for their own school to start. So, our swimming pool in our neighborhood is still open. So around when I need to be at work, I will make time to take them there. So that's still happening. If I can, I will do some working from home, where I'm able to be home for a little while. And if we have to, have popsicles out in the backyard when I'm on a break, we'll do that. But I want to think about some of those things, including encouraging summer reading periods. I might have to start reading for my classes, but they still have summer reading books to do. And I might think about ways to do that together and enjoy the rest of the summer. So I just want to throw those tips out there, just as a way to get us all sort of thinking about when we're starting back, when our students are starting back. You may have already discovered this and gotten into a cold panic, as I have, thinking about all the backpacks and the lunch containers and masks and everything that has to happen. But if you can kind of just at least get a quick grip on childcare situation, anything you can do to kind of slow that fast moving bus down, school bus on down, on getting ready for the school year, if you can kind of space out some of that to avoid the overhyped ramp up. And then lastly, trying to enjoy the last, moments of summer while you're with your children. You may be working at home, or if you're an administrator, you might be back at work and already have figured out a system. But in any event, I'm hoping these tips will be helpful as we all start back for the fall. So happy writing.